Okay, good afternoon. It's 30th of January, those of you that keep track of such things. Welcome to Zen with a Smile. This is attempt number 5. I'm torn between enjoying the first two without, the first 4 without very good sound. But my message was heartfelt, so put on your headsets. Anyway, I have an external mic and I'm hoping for a lot better sound now. I'd like to revisit my spirit guides. I mentioned them before, but I want to go in more detail today. I was aware from the time I was in a crib, earliest memories were lying in the crib, looking up in the corner and seeing, feeling, thinking. Something was looking down at me. And somehow that was more me than me was, than I was. That me was up there really looking down at, big me was looking at little me. And I never talked about it much at that time. Of course, I couldn't verbalize. Crib time, pre-verbalization. And never named it, just accepted it. Didn't talk about it much because I had no reason to believe that it wasn't so for everyone. And as I attentively explored such things, I didn't hear another response. I didn't hear anyone else tell me that they're experiencing the same thing. But I know you're out there somewhere. I know someone knows what I'm talking about. Anyway, that spirit that was always with me, some might think of it as a conscience. It was a voice that I would listen to help me make decisions, to guide me in the right directions. And something that I had felt a primacy, that was the ultimate authority that I was carrying within. And I learned that ignoring it was had my own cost and consequences. So I don't know at what stage I actually started feeling the presence of two beings right next to me all the time. I learned to become aware that when somehow it's funny, I look always up to the left corner, but this being is to my right. And this being, I learned later, was Dao in the Chinese Zen Chan tradition, Bodhidharma in the Indian, the 25th patriarch for the Indians, 28th, sorry, get the numbers right, 28th patriarch for the Indians. The patriarch was the lineage from Buddha being, of course, number 1, to Bodhidharma, that was number 28. He went to Japan, his teacher went to Japan, but he physically took a 3-year trip to get to parts of southern China and introducing and teaching Buddhism, and as he knew it, to anyone that would listen. Well, when he got into China, the tradition there was studying the sutras. This was a scholarship, and this was the ultimate searching that the monks did at that time. Really sutra-based. And for someone to come along, and apparently, not only did it have a stern appearance, but said to be blue-eyed, Persian-looking, non-Chinese for sure. And here it was telling them the pure, true teachings of Buddha. True lineage, a live lineage passed from teacher to student to teacher, passed down the line of the historical Buddha and his teachings. Very different than interpreting the sutras and he started stressing the personal experience, the personal expression, the personal journey that Buddhism helped. And of course, he was met with a lot of resistance. It's said that he sat in a cave or a small room for 9 years. I've heard 11 or 9 years, a long time, anyway, without speaking, and facing the wall, which was to become the Soto Zen style. Soto Zens face the wall, where Renzai Zen, the tradition that I spent some time with, faces inward, faces towards each other in a circle. But facing the wall, and someone was feeding him. I had a tradition that he was fed. But after 9 years, they begrudgingly started respecting him and listening to him. And people had requested his teachings. And the Chinese call him Dhammo. And as Chinese will, he became the first Chinese patriarch. Even though you and I both know he was no more Chinese than the man in the moon. But he became the first, 28th in the traditional Indian Buddhism, and became the first Chinese, the first patriarch in Chinese, in the Chinese scheme of things. And he was asked to share his teachings. And those of you know that about Buddha subjected himself to very rigorous practices before he gave up and was enlightened. But even there's a rigor even in his the teachings, long meditations, walking, mindfulness, lifetime spent in mindfulness, took effort and physical ability. And Dhammo, I like the Chinese name, Dhammo. Bodhidharma is nice too. But Dhammo looked at the monks around him. He was in the Shaolin temple area, and he started suggesting or started stressing that they need to get in physical shape, because Buddhism, a practitioner, takes care of the outer body through diet and exercise. Mindfulness living on top, keeping this vessel, this beautiful gift that we have alive and healthy and functional, and as well as the inner work. And he noticed that those guys just reading sutras tended to be not in very good shape. And he was in the Shaolin area, and he started rigorous martial arts training and whipping these cream puff monks into shape. And of course the Shaolin tradition continues with us to this day. But what I want to talk about Dhammo about is how he appeared to me, how he appears to me. Dhammo, on my right hand side, appears as a 13th or 12th or 11th or 10th, 3rd century Western jester, court jester, with the funny little hat, and someone that was able to entertain the emperors and the kings and the queens, but he's also able to criticize, which no one else dared to criticize. And also in his ramblings and this madness, they found a certain sanity and a certain grasp and a certain... he became to be known as the fool on the hill. He had an overarching view, a more extensive view, a better view than most of the people living alongside him. And he had a protected status and a lot of freedom that probably wasn't available to many other people. Anyway, this fool on the hill, my Dhamma, my stern Dhamma, is a fool on the hill who's talking non-stop. And it just seems like random nonsense, and you hear a kernel of a nugget of wisdom, and go, wow, but actually you have to keep up with him because there's a lot more there than you realize. And it takes deep reflection. And not only the stern, outwardly appearing Dhamma of all the sternness and the forbidding presence and the power of his silence, I saw him as a being diametrically opposed to this non-stop verbalization. And on top of all of this, he's always doing somersaults. I've never seen him stand up. He's doing somersaults as we move. He's doing somersaults while he's staying still. And all of this, with his non-stop diatribe, his dialogue, but continuous somersaults. Why somersaults? I'm just telling you, this is the energy as I experience it. So that's Dhammo, that's Bodhidharma, the 28th patriot for the Indians and the first patriot for the Chinese. He's known in Japan as Daruma, I believe. But same guy got around as his transmission from India to China continued on through Korea and eventually came to Japan, where the Zazen, the Soto, and the Rinzai Zen schools flourished. And I later had opportunity to spend time in Japan studying the Rinzai tradition. So, that's Dhamma. Over here, that's what I want to talk about today. The big guy. I call him the big guy. I call him my silent witness because he never speaks. You know what he wants, but you know it on some other level than the verbalization. And here I get this little guy. He's not more than 2 feet tall as he's somersaulting. And then I get this big guy on my left. And because he's silent, and his presence is huge, so I felt him there. But it was easier to focus on Dhamma, Bodhidharma, and listen for his wisdom because he's talking to me non-stop. Good company. Never alone with this guy. Alone. And yet, this big presence it hit me with his massiveness. It's just huge. He's just huge. This being is just huge. And it took me a lot more, I had to pay a lot closer attention. It took some refinement, I guess might be the word. It took some refinement because it wasn't so readily describable. But the way he presents himself to me is one of his incarnations, a Western incarnation in the Franciscan order. Monks from the Catholic Church. Franciscans wear the robes, the brown robes, and has a hood. I'm hoodless today, no hood today, but I'm hoodless. But he has a hood, and the hood comes down so that he has no face. I mean, he has a face, but I've never seen it. You just see a shadow. And that kind of goes with the presence of what I've given him as the silent witness. He's always watching. And through him, I learned the importance of watching, observation. It's maybe much more conducive to spiritual growth than listening to the words, but faceless and standing 8 feet tall. Okay. Standing 8 feet tall with just this brown, simple Franciscan monk robe. When I noticed down by his feet, well, the funny thing was he didn't have any. He has no feet. He's floating about 2 feet off the air. So I guess if I was going to be literal, he's only 6 feet tall because the first 2 feet is just air, no feet. The significance of this still escapes me. But if you watch the effortlessness of his moving, and when he's standing still, it's like he's hovering, just hovering there. And they move with me. They move with me as I go through life. Well, as I got to know more about him, I understood that one of his incarnations that he really identifies with. And they've told me that they have incarnations that, although we've all had many and they've had many more, there are certain ones that resonate or they identify with. For some reason, Dhammo identified with the fool on the hill, the gesture, the non-stop somersaulting enigma. And maybe because it was so diametrically opposed to our portrayal of him as this stern, stern taskmaster. Inside, he was just a goofball, for lack of a more academic term. Laughter. It's always laughing. Along with his words was a non-stop laughter. And the laughter, the smiling is usually associated with Milafo. Milafo is the happy Buddha, the smiling Buddha. And he's got the big, beautiful belly and the big round head and he's smiling. And I know that he has a different smile for each and every one of us. But underneath that smile is the toughness, is the strictness, is the firmness that we see on the outside of Dhammo. So it's interesting, And Dhammo likes this, at least that's what he's told me, he likes this image. He likes this image of the fool on the hill. He likes to not be taken so seriously. But his words still resound with the firmness and the strength of his character that we use to portray him in our art, and how he was supposed to appear to the world physically. Well, we're back here on the left, and this is his lifetime that he identified with the most from what he's somehow communicated to me without words. Without words. Because I never heard him talk. As far as I know, he never talks. But there was a 13th century, 1200s, I mean the 1200s, was a Franciscan monk named Roger Bacon. And a couple hundred years later, there was a Francis Bacon, who's sometimes they're kind of mixed up because, as I'll talk about, they had kind of some overlapping interests and contribution. But this guy was Roger Bacon was a couple hundred years earlier, educated, and a scholar, but a scientist, but in the 12th, the 13th century sense of the word. He was a scientist. Some of his work in optics, glasses, some of his work in optics was just so far ahead of his time. But he was also an astrologer, because in those days, science and astrology had been separated into the big gap. Somehow, science became sacred and astrology became the realm for less than, the poo-poo range, the one to be laughed at. But in Roger Bacon's time, he was the foremost astrologer, and it was one. Science was an umbrella. And he was also like a wizard. He had a wizard side. When they want to transmute iron to gold, alchemy is called. He had an alchemy side too. And there was mercury and all kind of funny things going on with metallurgy. Metals. Lots going on. But transmutation of something base and common like lead to something precious like gold. But if you look at alchemy in another way, the magic and the wizards, it's a way to transmute the iron in our soul to the gold it could be. So that transmutation is physical, emotional, mental, psychological. And he's a wizard. And it's really funny because I fancy myself a little bit of a wizard still. I love to point the hat. I don't have one, I should get one. But I too fancy myself as a little bit of wizard. But I'm not trying to turn something base like lead into gold on a physical level. I'm trying to turn shit into mud. I think that's the first step. Think about shit, okay? And then think about mud. Wow, the lotus flower, the symbol of wisdom, the symbol of the crown opening up. The lotus flower grows in mud, comes from mud, comes up out of water, clear and open. So that's a transmutation. Maybe that's an alchemy. So I just feel that if I can help some with people's shit and turn it into a harmless mud, that mud will sit still and the purity will separate from that. The mud will stay on the bottom. The purity, the clarity will come up from that mud. That's your job. My job, the job I'm happy to take, and maybe I have some skill there, is to turn the shit to mud. And then the mud to the pure, clear, mirror-like essence is your job. I got a big job, but believe me, your job is much bigger. Okay, so that's what I start to identify with my silent witness, with Roger Bacon, is this alchemy, this magic, combined with rationality. Combined with rationality and his contributions to the body of knowledge at his time was immense. He fell in disfavor for two pretty obvious reasons. Funny, but alchemy didn't bother people much. It was his vow of extreme poverty that really tugged at people. And he was shunned and outcast because he belonged to a schism or a section of the Franciscans that eschewed wealth. They took a vow of poverty. They lived with a very, very simple needs. And this was scary to people that were trying to get ready to pre-revolutionary industrial revolution, to start to change the thinking of people from agrarian crops and animals to work. And along with work, why work? To accumulate. To accumulate possessions. So here's this guy. This is nonsense. They live very simple. He had the rope on his back. I don't even think he had a rosary, because that was too ostentatious. It was too valuable. It was too So just a simple, and I kind of picture him, he has a string, a plain brown string, something like something that a butcher would wrap his package in and tie it with the twine, the brown twine. He wore something like that with a cross on it. Twine, some kind of twine, but not even a proper beadwork or a beauty of to signify their Christ and His sacrifice for all of us. And so in addition to His renunciation of material things, renunciation of wealth, of accumulating, of looking for happiness in material things, it was his astrology, his insistence that there was a science just as legitimate as any of the rest, and there was something to it. And so those two things were pretty much his burden that he carried, but he stuck to his goals, he stuck to his ideas, he stuck to his what's the word? Stuck to his gig. To put it in the 21st century parlance, or maybe 20th century now, gig is kind of updated. Talk about gigabytes, but it's another story. So, and I believe that Francis Bacon, although not, in my mind, not nearly the man that Roger Bacon was, because physically Francis Bacon was challenged. He wasn't in the best health. He wasn't that rigorous, and I get a real strength of character and bodily strength from Roger Bacon. But Francis Bacon is considered the father of modern science. So I do see that there is some, and I've been the silent witness. Roger has shared with me that indeed he kept the same name, and a couple hundred years later, to fulfill some of his karmic debt, karmic responsibilities, was put in a feebler body that didn't live quite as long as he did, but was a pillar called the father of empirical science, rationality, and as both of them shared something in common to be several hundreds of years ahead of their time. So at the time they were looked at askance. But this silent witness, this floating giant with no face and no voice, I can share the strength and I can't share how much I've gotten from them. And probably at this point I want to share with you that these guys aren't mine. I got no exclusivity on either of these energies or characters. They happen to be with me all the time, but you have yours. And they can be, they're doing the same job for thousands, if not millions, or tens of millions of people, whether people know it or not. So there's no exclusivity here. I'm just sharing with you how they, over the years, how they've manifested to me. And how important that manifestation is. Because I'm truly never alone. But the silent witness is probably, the lessons have been invaluable to me. Because I'm a talker, always have been. To a chosen audience, of course, and then I'm silent to those I don't choose. But I spend the majority of my time, 90% of my time, 95% of my time, sometimes alone. And of course there's not much talking to be done when you're alone. And the guys, I don't feel like I have much of any value to offer to them, so I don't really bother waste their time talking to them. I learned to witness. Why did it do that? I thought I set it on. I still got work to do. Okay. Anyway, the screen just went black on me. I don't know how to affect the video. And I'm still to see how the sound is on this. But again, my spirit guides, the silent witness, the giant on this side, and the fool on the hill, the babbling idiot, the somersaulting enigma on my right side. Help me face life. Help me make progress. Help me share with you. And I'm hoping that you might start paying more attention to see who your guides are. Start to look to them as part of your inward search and experimenting. We say journey. I like the word journey, even though journey without a destination. Because there's nowhere to go. You're already here. Thank you.